Check, check. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here, and welcome to the first meeting of 2025, January 13th, 2025. I would like to acknowledge that we are gathering and governing on the unceded traditional territory of what is now the Comox Nation, and we are always grateful for their grace and collaboration as we govern these lands. Could I have a motion to accept the agenda, please?
Move the agenda.
Thank
Second.
you. Second. All in favor of that agenda? Thank you. And minutes, the minutes of the financial hall meeting on November 18th and regular council meeting December 9th, 2024.
Move the minutes.
Second.
And all in favor of those minutes? And that's carried as well. And we have a delegation, Beaufort Family Health Society. Come on up. You're welcome to sit or stand, whichever you're more comfortable.
I'll stand, no worries. Whatever you say. That's great. Excellent.
And all our tech's going to work.
Does all this work
Awesome.
too? Perfect. Excellent. Well, thanks for having us back. Today we have a presentation to talk about a bit of the progress that we've made as the Beaufort Family Health Society. So the Beaufort Family Health Society owns and operates Cumberland Village Healthcare, the only primary care facility in Cumberland. So today I'm going to talk a little refresher, just to remind everybody what we've done over the last number of years to build a sustainable healthcare clinic in the community. And then we're going to talk a little bit about our community governance model and what that means. This is a community-owned facility, community-owned clinic. That's really special for Cumberland and somewhat unique. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then we're going to talk about a little bit about our funding model and some of the challenges of operating in a provincially funded healthcare model and what that means for us, how we get funded, and what some of the challenges are with funding a society in healthcare. So this gives us all a bit of context. So our story, everybody here who's been here for a while knows that medical clinics have come and gone often in Cumberland. And we set out in 2022 to build a society that owned and operated a facility so that this facility would stay even though practitioners might come and go. So we wanted a professionally managed facility. So that meant doing the finances right, doing the operations right, making sure that we had a board of directors that were representative of the community, and ensuring that we had good practices in place overall. So the last closure of that clinic, the last clinic who was here previously in that same space, closed in July 2021, right in the middle of COVID. 6,500 patients throughout the Comox Valley lost their practitioner overnight. So we set out to change that. Over that time, the Village of Cumberland was highly supportive of this, and the Village helped work with our board and our MLA to advocate for funding to open this clinic and this model. Okay. Next one. There we go. Great. So we are a registered society. We currently have 4 board directors. Oh. I'll just talk while we talk. Excellent. That side. Perfect. So
We're back.
yeah, there we're back. All right, so we have a Cumberland focus, but we do serve the entire Comox Valley. We definitely serve Cumberland first. We understand that the clinic being here, we're very concerned with making sure that this community has the primary care it needs, but we do work collaboratively within the region to ensure that all patients have access to healthcare. And we do intend to have more Indigenous representation in our organization as well, and be a safe space for Indigenous peoples to access healthcare. So our vision and mission, we really wanted integrative, comprehensive healthcare. So this means that under one roof, we intend to offer the ability to see a primary care provider, so a doctor or nurse practitioner, as well as other healthcare providers, mental health, social work, dietitian, clinical pharmacy, etc. And so we do now house those professionals in our clinic part-time. We share them with other clinics, but it's a wonderful model where patients can get all their needs served under one roof rather than waiting for referrals to specialists. It's all within this model. Our board right now, I have Linda and Keith here with me, and many of you know them as well. That's excellent. I've been along since the beginning, as well as Emma Gledhill. And Carol Moore joined us a year and a half ago or so. So excited to have that. Our big milestones opened in April, or we started our society in April, secured our funding. Took a while. Evidently, even though it took a year and a half to open a clinic, that was the fastest that's ever happened in BC. So it took a lot of effort. We opened our doors, began operations September 5th, 2023. So we've been open for about 18 months now. It's great. The clinic itself, we have 6.2 primary care providers, so 6.2 full-time equivalents. These allied health providers, 1.6. We have our RN, mental health, social work, dietitian. Our goal is to have about 5,000 patients served by the time we're fully up to speed. It takes some time to onboard that many patients, so we have a rolling goal of adding about 2,500 right now, which is where we're at a year and a half in, which is wonderful. We also have 4.5 FTE of staff, including my role. So you have a total of over 10 new jobs created in Cumberland as a result of this work. Community-led governance is really interesting. Most medical facilities are privately owned by the practitioners themselves. This puts risk on a community if those practitioners can choose to leave whenever they want. They could close a practice, they could change a practice, they could change their scope of practice. We wanted to make sure that there was a community governance structure in place to ensure that our clinic was able to meet the needs of healthcare in this community. So we have a community-led board who govern the organization. We have myself as executive director. We have a clinic manager full-time in the clinic, and we have a clinic leadership team that oversees the clinical care quality as well. So this is somewhat unique by having a society govern a medical clinic. But there's a long learning curve, understanding healthcare, the business of healthcare, and the world of nonprofit and healthcare don't necessarily merge well. So we've had some growing pains. So community-led governance means input from the community, representation of the community in our board and membership structure. This means leadership from the community, transparency back to the community on our operations, and decisions made in the long-term best interest of the community. So we have faced many challenges which might require or suggest a short-term solution to a long-term problem, and we're very much taking that long-term look. So for our board, this means board directors from the community, and this right now could be anybody, but we're focused on Cumberland and the Comox Valley representation. Our board organizational activities include community input, so we are in the process of doing community needs assessment, and that will become more publicly visible in the coming months. And so we're gathering input from the community on what the healthcare needs are of the community and determining how our society can play a role in that, either inside or outside of the clinic. Awesome. And what this means for membership. We currently do not have members other than our board directors. And membership from the community is something we're looking for. And so we are very interested in having the voices of our community partners and those who represent major community stakeholders having a membership voice in our organization. So we will be looking at this model as we move ahead. But the Village of Cumberland is a very interested and interesting party that might want to have its voice represented in the membership of our society. So just a visual for those of you who are visually inclined. This is our organizational structure at the moment. So community membership will inform our community board, and that community board oversees our executive director, me today, and other board committees, and then we have a organizational structure below that. Our funding model is a bit unique. We asked for funding to be able to modify the existing building to house enough rooms for us to be financially sustainable. As a community-led clinic, we receive a fixed amount of funding per primary care provider. So we do not have the ability, like a private clinic might, to reinvest its profits into creating more space, more revenue, more opportunities. So we're operating on a fixed budget. That fixed budget has not changed in years. So the amount per provider has not changed in years. I think we all know what's happened with inflation. So you can just imagine how much tighter those purse strings have to be year to year. We're trying to offer a living wage to our staff. We're trying to provide the best care possible. And some of the challenges and limitations of that is we don't have enough money to hire all of the medical office assistants we would like to have. So we have to operate within that. It will eventually hurt primary care. It eventually hurts our ability to onboard patients faster rather than slower. We're limited by space to even house medical office assistants. So our space is something long-term we would love to explore owning our own facility so that those rent costs, which are high for a relatively new building, we're now the owner instead of paying rent. That gives us a lot more flexibility. So this is something we're looking at very long term. We do have a great relationship with our landlord, has been very accommodating for us and has also agreed to some rent reductions for us. So very happy to have the partners in the community working with us to make sure our model is financially sustainable. So we do have a long-term operating budget that is in place and is financially sustainable today. The crux is we're able to provide the quality of care that we can within that budget. There's always more that we can do. So the support of the village is something that we have been looking for, and the village has been supportive in past years and recently this year as well, to fund costs that are not related to the cost of primary care. So costs that are not funded by the province. So when you're a society owning a healthcare facility, the ministry only funds the care in the clinic. They don't fund the society. So there is no money for governance, for strategic planning, for filing government things, for any of our government meetings, for doing any of our governance work. None of that is funded. So this is where the model for healthcare in a nonprofit model is somewhat broken. There is no mechanism currently in the provincial government for those costs to be funded. So we are looking for our partners, stakeholders, funders to obtain the funds that we need to do that activity on our own. That may or may not be sustainable in the long term. So some of the things that we're really interested in asking for support for is ongoing support from the village to advocate for increases to the provincial overhead funding that is received per practitioner. This is not a problem that is unique to Cumberland. This is every primary care facility in BC has this struggle with not enough overhead funding coming from the province. But adding our voice to the message can't hurt. Our MLA, Josie Osborne, is the Minister for Health. So great connection to have. Support's also interested, we're looking at participation as a membership. So we are posing the question to the municipality, would this be something you'd be interested in? And in terms of having your voice of the community's needs represented in our membership. So something to think about. We have our AGM that's held annually. I think that would be a great minimum commitment to attend that. So very interested to at least have the village's voice. So I think that's just an update on where we're at. I want to thank everybody here from behalf of me and the board for the support we've received to date, both financial and otherwise, and invite any questions.
Thanks so much, Janet, and thanks for all you and the board and the staff have done so far in making healthcare available in the village. It's obviously a huge need, so it's much appreciated. Questions, Council? Go ahead, Councillor Tyrion.
Hi, Jen.
Hi.
How does this differ from private practices then, this funding model? Aren't private practices funded per patient?
There are multiple different funding models for primary care providers in the province. Our model, our providers are paid on salary and they get an overhead amount that is a salaried amount. So some providers are on a fee-for-service basis where they charge per visit, per practitioner or per patient based on what kind of visit you have, and then they need to cover their own costs of overhead out of those revenues. So our model is fixed. We can't earn more money. So, yeah.
All right. Yeah. All right. That's.
Yeah. So does that mean so each the province funds each position, and in a normal clinic, part of that money would be taken for overhead, or is that what you guys are doing now?
That's what we're doing
Okay.
now. So The salary portion that comes to the provider is paid directly from the Island Health, in our case, to our providers. Island Health then pays us as a society for the overhead portion of that, and we oversee the administration of that funding pool. So we're accountable for ensuring that those overhead dollars are used for their intended purposes.
Right. So the problem is that number hasn't increased.
It hasn't increased, and
Even
it
though we've
doesn't
had-
include governance. So it must be used for patient-related costs, not for society-related costs.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Questions,
This would be
comments?
something we talk about at UBCM,
Probably, yeah.
Yeah,
I know,
the kind of societal membership you're looking for.
that'd be great.
and I know the CVRD is bringing a resolution to UBCM to try and increase funding for rural clinics. And if we can get that moved through, then we will try and make sure that one is also designated as a rural clinic and possibly open up that. But
We are considered a rural clinic already,
yeah,
and funnily enough, so is Victoria, that region.
Really?
So, yep. Only Vancouver and Kelowna are considered urban
Okay.
in this province.
okay.
Yep.
So may I just follow up on that then? To clarify, the issue isn't simply insufficient funding, but it's the fact that the funding is restricted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we don't want to
so
use
an
the-
increase in the restricted funds would not actually help you. So the argument that needs to be made is for an
Both.
expansion of the both. Yes, an increase in the funds, but also an expansion away from the restriction.
Correct. Yeah, we certainly don't want to take costs away or funds away from potential patient use. So we don't want to cannibalize that pool of funds at all. Yep.
I just had a question. Is there a mechanism in place for current practitioners to pay into the society for governance, or is that
There is a mechanism called donations, and that would be up to their personal decision.
okay?
Yeah.
And when's your AGM?
Next one will be between April and June. Yeah.
We'll be informed of that.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely. Great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the time. Nice to see all of you. Thanks very much for your support.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Thanks for being here. And thanks to the board members as well for being here and all your work.
Do you
Okay,
need a motion to receive?
we do need a motion to receive. Thank you.
Then I'll move that council receive a delegation from the Beaufort Family Health Society regarding the funding of the clinic.
Second.
And all in favor of that? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Next up is disaster risk reduction climate adaptation resolution request. Chief Williamson, come on up.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. Happy New Year. So the first, this disaster risk reduction is a grant we're putting in for a grant for as all four communities plus First Nations to get some funding for equipment and for disaster planning. And we're just asking the council or Cumberland to join in with that group and apply for this grant. There's some of it's on climate change where we're looking for like Tagger dams are going to supply or going to want to purchase some misting devices so we can set up in public parks or whatever where we want to set them up. For climate, when the climate gets too hot, and yeah, it's not that huge of a grant for all four communities, but it's certainly a start. We've always worked in disaster risk management. We've always done that for as long as I know. And this is just an additional funding for that problem. Any questions on that?
Questions?
Just a question of curiosity. Have we had a flood in Cumberland?
Yes. We've had the lower lake, the cabins along the lower lake,
Oh, okay.
along Hornberry Road there. I like this Tiger Dam idea. I think Rob introduced that idea because we can also use that in reverse. So say if we had a wildfire situation, we can fill those dams with water in certain areas, and then we can, after they're full or we have time to set them up, we can also drain those dams for wildfire protection. So I know they're not thinking that way, but that's the way I was thinking of them. And always looking for water in a wildfire situation.
Makes sense.
So they have double purpose as far as I can see.
Nice.
Courtney already has several. You've probably seen them along
Definitely.
George's food bar area there.
Anybody else?
Nope.
So the list of things in the report, those are all, so it's a joint application, but those things would be housed in Cumberland, or they're housed jointly and then you pull them as you need them?
I believe the Tagger dams are going to be housed in Cumberland.
Okay.
And I'm not sure about the misters yet, how they're going to deploy them. But I'm sure Cumberland will be able to get one. We have one
Yeah.
for the for firemen in wildfire situation.
Oh,
They work pretty good.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm sure we'll be able to. I think we're getting five of them. So each community will probably get one, I guess.
Is that something that could be used for like an event, like a community event, or
Like
just for emergencies?
to borrow?
Yeah.
I don't
Potentially?
know. That the fire department one?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Okay.
But this one, I think one of them is gonna be stored at, over here at the rec center, I believe.
Oh,
Yeah.
sweet.
So there you go.
Noted.
Okay. Awesome. If there's no more questions, there's a recommendation there.
I'll move that the regional application submitted to the Union of BC Municipalities Community Emergency Preparedness Fund 2024 Disaster Risk Reduction Climate Adaptations Category 2 Fund for up to $100,000 be approved, and that as the primary applicant, the CVRD will apply for, receive, and manage the grant funding, if successful, through Service 270 Comox Valley Emergency Management on behalf of its partners, Comox First Nations, City of Courtenay, Village of Cumberland, and Town of Comox.
Second.
Thank you. And all in favor of that? And that is carried unanimously. And the next is Community Resiliency Investment Grant Funding.
So this grant we applied for last year also. I don't know if you remember it or not, but it's just a continuation or the same thing, but for the same amount of money for the same grant from the province, and pretty much covering the same things. The only change is when we do inspections for houses or grounds or areas, it's going to come directly out of our fire department. So we have 5 people trained to do that in our department. So if you apply to have your land or your house evaluated, it'll be a fireman from Cumberland, and the grant will pay that person. Before they hired a guy to do all the valley, they found that it would be better if we used our own personal people out of our own departments to know the community and know the areas better. So that's about the only change in that grant. It's going to cover the same things. In fact, we have a meeting tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. We're going to already start planning for this grant.
Awesome.
And it's all the communities and First Nations are all in on it. We all feel we get a better shot at the grant if we all go together on it and work it out that way.
So,
Go ahead.
so how's funding allocated then amongst the communities? Is it for specific items, or you get a share, or?
Yeah, most of we did a lot of inspections last year, so we used a lot of that grant money in Cumberland. But now it'll be individually wise, or property wise. So it depends on how many people ask for that service, and then we'll siphon off that grant. The rest of it is like planning for, we're talking about bringing a chipper in once a year, so people can bring their stuff to the curbside. We'll hire a chipper to come around. That's part of, we can apply for that out of the grant. And most communities do that. I'm not sure Courtney does, but I know Comox does and Oyster River does. And we never did it last year, but we plan on doing it this year. We have to just pick a date and a week. So we apply for things. That's the start of the meeting tomorrow, what we want to do in our community. And then the board will figure out, okay, this is how we're going to divide it up. I can't say for sure how it's all divided up, but that's the idea behind the division of the funds.
Sounds good. Thank you.
If there's anything you guys think we could do with that, we have these meetings every month, so we ask for stuff like we want to do the chipping, and we want to keep the individual property inspections and stuff like that. We want to keep all that stuff going in Cumberland. And there's a few other things we want to do, but we're having a few problems getting that organized. But yeah, so if anything you come up with, you just give me a call or an email or something. I can take it to the committee, and if you think there's anything in there we should be doing more, like for wildfire suppression or whatever.
Yeah, like I wonder, I assume we've had a good pickup here because we're a fire interface community and people are living right next to the forest and they're afraid. But it might be useful to get, like, do a ring around the village and give them mail, like, let them all know to come and give information so that we're encouraging those people who are right adjacent to actually fire smart their, or whatever it's called, fire
Yeah,
smart their
we'll do.
homes.
Like that's another thing that'd be part of it. Like there'd be advertising and ads in the paper and
Yeah,
that
awesome.
kind of information.
If there's no more questions?
I'll just comment to anyone who hasn't done that yet. We invited and had that assessment done, and I was really pleased, and it was helpful. Yeah, so I'd encourage everybody to have that. There's things you don't realise.
Yeah, Cumberland certainly needs that. They need that inspection, and a lot of people don't. You're right; they don't understand. It's not to take down trees and all that stuff. It's to make them safer, make your yard safer, make the surrounding areas safer. But some of it's private property where we're not allowed on it, so
Right.
we have to be asked.
Okay, there's a recommendation there if there's no more questions.
I'll move that the regional application submitted to the Union of BC Municipalities Community Resiliency Investment Fund, Fire Smart Community Funding and Support for up to $2 million over 2025-2026 be approved. And that as a primary applicant, the Comox Valley Regional District will apply for, receive, and manage the grant funding if successful through Service 270 Comox Valley Emergency Management on behalf of its partners, sub-applicants, Comox First Nation, City of Courtenay, Village of Cumberland, Town of Comox.
Second.
Seconder, okay, thank you. And all in favor? And that is carried unanimously as well.
Okay, thank
Thanks,
you.
Mike.
If you haven't looked at California, I've been watching that really closely
Yeah.
and learning some stuff too. Also, just watching it, it's pretty devastating
Crazy.
down there, and it's good to see some BC firefighters going down there to help.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Okay, and then the council member monthly reports are there for receipt or questions?
Move
Nope.
receipt?
Thank you,
Second.
thank you. All in favor? Thank you. And now we're on to zoning bylaw amendment 3345 Second Street, Guaxidas. And I think, okay, we're getting Bridget and Courtney to come up. Thank you. So for you, those of you in the audience interested in this item, there is a report beginning on page 32 of the agenda package, which is available on the table. I hope some of you have that and maybe share with your neighbors. There's a lot of information in there. Hi.
Hi, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and councilors and community members. Thanks, I'm Bridget Reynolds, and I've been working with the Director of Planning, Courtney Simpson, and Chief Administrative Officer, Michelle Mason, on this project, the zoning amendment for the property at 3345 Second Street. And so we also have on the call Holly Pretty and Katie Fabris from Macola. So when it comes time to questions and so on, there's some of the technical elements that they may be better able to answer than myself or Courtney. So the primary recommendation in the staff report is that council give first and second reading to bylaw 1223. For the property at 3345 Second Street. And there's also seeking council's consideration of amendments to the housing agreement that is registered on the title of the property. And I'll talk more about the details as we go through. So you're probably familiar with the property at Second Street beside the Cumberland Lodge. It's 2,000 square meters in size. The property was rezoned to RM4, so the residential multifamily zone. And that zone was developed specifically for that property. It's the only property within the village that has that zone. And council approved that rezoning back in July of 2023. In September of that year, council also approved a development permit for a 3-story, 22-unit apartment, and also approved a development variance permit to reduce the parking requirements, as well as reducing the rear yard setback for that proposed development. If council supports or moves forward with the zoning bylaw amendment, the new proposal would require approval of amendments to the development permit and development variance permit. So those would come later in the process. You're probably aware applications have been made to BC Housing Community Housing Fund on a couple of occasions in 2022 and in 2023 for a 3-story, 22-unit multifamily development on this site, but they were not successful. And so, just as a reminder, BC's housing goal when it comes to these types to supporting the construction and development of housing is to provide as much support as they can for as many units across the province. And one of the things about a smaller community, typically seeking smaller developments and more in character with the community, is at a bit more of a disadvantage because the smaller buildings tend to have higher per unit costs for both construction and operation. And certainly feedback from BC Housing with the previous submissions was that more units would be more likely to receive a higher score. The original proponent was the Comox Valley Transition Society, and as you're aware, they chose not to proceed with another funding application. And so Macola Housing Society and the Village of Cumberland has entered into a memorandum of understanding to prepare the funding application and to potentially operate the building. If you're not aware, Macola, they've been around for many years, and they manage upwards of over 1,600 units across the province in large and small communities. So the proposed amendments, so the RM4 zone currently establishes a maximum base density of 85 units per hectare. So what this translates in terms of the size of the property, the 2,000 square meters, the maximum number of permitted units is 17. The bylaw also includes a density bonus provision, whereby the number of units can be increased to an additional 25 units per hectare, where 20% or more of the units are affordable housing. So in this case, that permits the original 22 units. So the zoning bylaw amendment would is proposing to amend the base density of the units per hectare from the 85 to 145 units per hectare. And that translates to 29 units for the property of this size. And then relying on the existing density bonus provision of the additional 25 units per hectare, where the development meets the affordable housing criteria, that totals to the 34 proposed units. The maximum height under the current zone, the RM4 zone, is 12.5 meters. Which is essentially a 3-story building. The proposed amendment would permit a taller building up to 14.5 meters. And so the proposed amendments of both height and density, they're closely linked, because it's together these amendments accommodate that needed mix of the 1 to 4 bedrooms, and it allows for the maintenance of the existing footprint, which would retain that mature Douglas fir tree on 2nd Street, as well as the proposed courtyard on the 2nd Street frontage. That proposed height of 14.5 meters and proposed density of the 34 units, or if we were using the floor area ratio, 1.6, they're closely aligned with another zone district in the village core commercial mixed use zone, and that permits buildings at the height of 15 meters and a density of 2.0 floor area. And the OCP does also state, envisions that apartments could be a height of up to 4 stories. Just to turn to the variances, council previously approved a variance for the original development, and that's one of them was to reduce the rear yard setback, and that's the one that abuts the Cumberland Lodge parking area from 7.5 meters to 2 meters. And again, and so the previous DVP was for the 3 stories, and because the proposal is to go to 4 stories, in order for it to, the variance permit to be aligned, have to address it with the 4th story also has to receive a variance. And also another proposed variance is related to vehicle parking requirements. And the original development the variance was granted from requiring 22 spaces to 8 spaces. And again, so there are proposed 8 spaces that are on the drive aisle going into the Cumberland Lodge site. So those would be mostly on the subject property. So the proposal then is to reduce the number of parking stalls from the 34 to 8. So some of the mitigations with regards to the parking, 14 angled parking stalls are proposed on the 2nd Street frontage, and they would be developed at the time that the building is constructed. Through this process, we've been talking with VHA staff about meeting that 12-space shortfall on the Cumberland Large parking lots, and those conversations are still all ongoing. And the last conversation we had was they're going to should be taking it to their leadership team sometime this week or next. So, and they'd be curious to know the outcome of today's meeting, of course. So the improvement, also a sidewalk on 2nd Street is proposed as part of the development, and that would help to improve some of the pedestrian safety along there. And just as a reminder, in terms of sort of support for reduced parking requirements, council does have a policy related to that. It is for the village core mixed use zone, so not this area, but it certainly reflects council's intent to support parking variances for affordable housing projects. And Macola, as we were working through this project or process, they identified their experience with other developments that they manage across the province, and they see that, you know, not in many of the buildings, not all residents have cars. You know, particularly it's either whether by choice or for economic reasons. So we can't be guaranteed that everybody's going to have a car. So as far as the variance, the DVP relates to the parking and the rear yard setback. So that would then have to come back to council at a future meeting should council want to entertain this zoning amendment bylaw. There's 3 agreements that are already in place between VHA and the village, and those need to be amended because of some of the changes. With Macola being involved is one of them, and then of course the housing agreement, which is probably the more significant agreement of the 3. There's the access agreement on the Cumberland Lodge parking access road or drive aisle. There's the land lease agreement between the village and VHA, and then the housing agreement. So with the housing agreement, that is adopted by bylaw, and there's, as I say, a number of clauses would have to be amended. One of the things that VHA has requested, because of the proposed increase in the number of units, they're suggesting or requesting that could that number of dedicated units, because the housing agreement identifies there's 4 potential or 4 dedicated units for VHA staff already in the housing agreement that are identified, and they're requesting, because of the increase in the total number of units, could those numbers of units go from 4 and be increased to 6? And they're also asking if the residency requirements could be expanded, because right now the housing agreement limits the those units to be accommodating staff members who live in the village or who work in the village. They would like to see it expanded to the broader Comox Valley Regional District, because they're having issues in terms of trying to hire staff when it comes to housing. So for example, somebody who's wanting to work at North Island Hospital might be a potential candidate if there's consideration for changing those residency requirements. And so a revised agreement would then be coming forward as a condition of adoption of the zoning amendment. So for the relating to the public consultation, I'll just touch on it briefly. Staff follow the procedures laid out in the development approval procedure bylaw. So we held a public information meeting December 10th, and also notice for first reading was made to, as required in the bylaw, signing on the property, notice to neighbors within 75 meters, website, and the Comox Valley Record. Something to note that there's recent changes to the Local Government Act, and that prohibits local governments from holding public hearings for zoning amendment applications that are consistent with the OCP, where the sole purpose of the bylaw is to permit a development that's whole or in part a residential development. So council has received a lot of emails and comments, submissions from community members. There were a number of comment sheets, about 34, received at the public information meeting. And some of these comments, I'm just going to have a drink.
Take your time.
So some folks certainly, express support for the proposal, whereas others, sorry, I'm just going to take this.
Yeah.
I came prepared. So, yeah, and I mean, there was a lot of concern expressed by community members, specifically related to the increase in density, the total number of units, the building height, and reduced parking. There's concern, of course, that the size of the development, that it's out of character, and there'll be shading impacts to the neighboring homes, and there'll be increased traffic and parking congestion, as well as reduced pedestrian safety. There were some suggestions also about possible alternative locations. So, I mean, as part of the application or moving through this process, for some of the concerns related to parking specifically, we're certainly working to mitigate some of these potential impacts. The addition of the sidewalk along Second would improve pedestrian safety in that location, and I mean, as far as the character, I mean, it is a larger building, and there will be impacts. There will be changes to the neighborhood, and however, and then it really comes down to council in terms of deciding if the addition of this development and the need for affordable housing units within the village and within the valley outweigh the concerns. Yeah, of course.
Just briefly add, add in terms of pedestrian safety and the roadway at 2nd Street. Since the inception of this project, the intent has been to budget for road upgrades on 2nd Street to align to occur shortly after the development is completed or at the same time in conjunction with the parking stalls that were installed. And that keeps being deferred as we don't get the funding. So if we do get the funding, we'd make every effort to bring that back into the budget to do those upgrades. And if it happens shortly after the development is completed, then there's a real opportunity to see how pedestrians and vehicles are actually using the area and to design the improvements to address any concerns.
Thanks, Courtney. Go ahead.
So just to summarize, in terms of the recommendation, staff is recommending granting the first and second reading of bylaw 1223, and also seeking support for, in principle, the related amendments to the housing agreement to increase the number of dedicated VHA staff units from 4 to 6, expand the residency requirements from to the broader Comox Valley Regional District, and also to direct staff to continue to pursue locating those some of that shortfall, or 12 parking spaces for this development on the Cumberland Lodge parcel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Questions? Council, actually, before we go to questions, I will just take a moment, given that we have quite an audience for this item, to mention that the conversation we are about to have is for council to deliberate amongst ourselves on this item based on the report we've been given and the information we've been given, and to ask questions around that. At the end of this meeting, which is very soon after this discussion, there will be a time for questions. So if we can just sit tight until that time, you'll have an opportunity to ask any questions that have not been answered by the report or staff or council while we're talking now. Who would like to start?
I'll start out with just a couple simple ones here. I really do like the amendment there, and that considers expanding the affordable units to 6 VHA members. I've heard from many folks that the number one challenge to attract healthcare providers here, especially in the long-term care facilities, is basically housing. One suggestion I might have is perhaps if we don't just have all 6 outside the village, but there's a split, maybe 2/3 that are within the village based on demand, and 2 that come from the broader Comox Valley. I also think this would, if VHA is guaranteed those spots, I think it would be almost incumbent upon them to provide parking, given that people that come from outside the village and that, or who have to work at the lodge, for example, they're going to need a parking spot during the day anyway. So I see that being quite a bonus for it as well. So that's the start of mine.
Thanks, Councillor.
So I've got a few here. I'll start off with a question. So we're here at. I'm new on this seat. So there's second reading, which means that this is initial discussion.
First and second, yeah.
And first and second,
Yep.
it's tabled and then initial discussion. So the next step will be at a separate meeting, third reading. So between then there is opportunity for further thought and communication, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right.
Given that, is it appropriate or done to refer an application like this after second for further input from APC and homeless and affordability?
Courtney?
Yeah, there aren't any concerns with the timing in terms of after second reading and before third of doing the referral at that time.
Just that those committees exist to augment and give us additional public input and citizen input, and to help if there are things to be done to strengthen or improve the proposal. So I would, whenever's appropriate, I'd like to. Is that something I should move now, or Do we do it later? Or?
Maybe after the discussion, after we've,
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
that's okay. So I just wanted to clarify that that was an appropriate thing
Yeah.
to think about.
Just a question on, do you have a question on that? Do you have any specific direction or issue areas or things that you would like to be, would like the HAH, the Homelessness Committee, to consider? Just to provide a bit more direction to them as opposed to leaving it very broad.
Yeah, understood. I think it's really a consideration of the sort of what I'd consider the strongest community concerns about parking, traffic, and character. Yeah. All right. Should I just keep going with my little list? Simple one. The floor plans actually suggest balconies on the second and third floor. When I look at the floor plans, there's these boxes coming out from each of the places, but the elevations don't. Does the building include those?
No, I think what that reflects is, Courtney and I were looking at it, and just that the ground floor, there'll be a patio.
Yep.
And I think it's just
Oh, it's
reflecting what's
looking
happening,
down on
in the plan
patio.
view.
Okay, just clarifying.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's okay. That's partly because actually of some of the overlooking concerns are exacerbated by balcony spaces. Okay. So more substantive. Does the housing agreement or anything else we do here create a responsibility or on the flip side a right for village to monitor the ongoing quality of the operation as Macola operates the building? Is what's the format? Should there be I guess if we imagine in 20 years' time there's some serious shortfall in the maintenance or the operation, what does the village have any role?
I don't think it would be any different than any other development in the community. I mean, there'd be, certainly oversight as far as nuisance bylaws. The nuisance bylaw might cover some aspects. Yeah.
Yeah, we went on that in the lease agreement with FIHA. There is a clause that talks about how the tenant, the village, would not, allow a nuisance to be occurring on the property. So, when it comes to preparing the sublease for the operator, we'd have to include something about that, and that hasn't been drafted yet. So, I think that would be the time to look at what the village's roles and responsibilities could be.
Okay, but it will place some responsibility on us in that way. Okay.
can I just follow up while you're
Yeah,
prepping
yeah.
your next question? And is there a caretaker on site?
No, I understand there's no caretaker on site. That's right.
Okay.
Oh,
But I would like to say, it is managed. It just wouldn't be in-house.
Yeah.
So they would
They just don't live
manage
there.
the building just like any other property manager would. And the phone call would come in, my building's whatever, this and that. Yeah.
Okay.
That's right. When we talked with Macola about this, and they commented that there's other properties nearby, so there isn't a need. There's already a property manager living locally, so there wasn't a need to also house them at that location.
And just if I may add, another consideration with that is to have somebody on site, then of course, then increases the operating costs,
Yeah.
which is another factor.
We lose that, sweet. Sorry.
Okay. What, if any, mechanisms are there during construction and in fact operation? Should we go ahead for communication channels between neighbours and the building itself? Is there any? I'm thinking, during construction, we've had construction going on right near us of a relatively large development. It was nice to be able to say, "Hey guys, remember it's not before 7 o'clock." And have an open channel with the developer at that point. So I'm just wanting to know if there's any intention there.
I'll take that one. Yeah, I think with a development of this size, we would certainly expect that there's contact information for the contractor available to anyone nearby to speak directly with them if they have any concerns about the noise or any disturbance, debris on the roads, road sweeping, anything like that. And of course, they can always then, if they're not getting satisfaction, they could contact the village as well.
okay.
just a note really, there's a lot of questions circulating on social media and in conversations I'm having, and in many of these I see when I read deep into the report, I've got like, that's answered in the report and this information that's circulating isn't accurate. Much is, but much isn't. And it's difficult to address everything. I was just wondering if we can amp up maybe FAQs or some other means of clarifying some of those things that we're seeing frequently questioned. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've talked about preparing an FAQ. Yeah.
Thank you. And we say, did you note that VCMU1, the village core, effectively allows a similar density and height, and that's what, about 300 meters away from this building? Yeah, I think it's something of that order. So we're pretty, we're not deeply inconsistent in that way with. It's not as if we're doing. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Sullivan?
We've talked about it at the table before, but I was curious when and how or if we could have a conversation about the ride sharing or something like that within the project to mitigate some of the parking issues.
Yeah, one of the proposals is to have, because there isn't any kind of car share in in the Comox Valley at this point in time, and there's an example I think from Courtney where they've got, is it Turo? So the idea of dedicating a spot for that function, that car share or car rental possibility that's out there. And there was also the possibility, the regional district has started their e-bike share program. And so it sounds like from the staff report that they had to the regional board was to expand that, and Cumberland being a possible next location. So to have a conversation with staff around that to see if there's an opportunity to locate something near or on the property.
Nice. Okay, that will definitely help. Yeah, as far as the VHA dedication spots, I actually was leaning to say no to the expansion for them and keep it up forward to have maybe more opportunities for people to live in the spaces. But after hearing Councillor Barecki and kind of figuring that maybe the leverage might be an issue with that, with the Cumberland Lodge conversation, I could be accepted to the 6. Yeah, and I don't really have any more questions. I'd just like to thank staff for all the work they've been doing on this. This is the third kick at the can. This is a very difficult topic for the village at large, and if and when we get the grant accepted, when I drive into this community and see that building that we are providing for lower income families, I will be proud and inclusive in this village. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. That leaves you, Councillor Tyrion.
Thank you. I'm going to continue on with a bit of Councillor Councillor Ward, I think. I've lost my mind. Line of questioning. I'm a little unclear on the entire ownership structure, and I've read over the lease and the MOU, and I'm still not sure. So, who ultimately owns the building?
Yeah, the building would be owned by Macola.
Okay. So Macola will be the owner of the building, and then they will operate it. Does that mean that Macola is also takes all of the construction risk? They accept the grant money. They provide the building. If there's cost overruns, that is all Macola's risk at that point as well?
Yes, that's our understanding, and that will be all worked out in the sublease.
Okay.
And I'll just add also, if funding is approved, BC Housing works. There's like many different stages, and they work with with Macola and to on all the different phases of getting to what the funding is needed. Like it's not like, okay, you're funded for this amount or what. Like
Okay, so it doesn't work like our sewer project.
That's what I was getting at.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's very good to know. So then, So then presumably any, once the building is completed and operational, any rents and revenues that come from the building, if there's excess monies after operation costs are paid, then those are retained by Macola to further other projects that they have then? Or does that money then funnel back to the village? Or is that again part of?
That would have to, I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
It would all be part of the BC house. If we were lucky enough to get the BC housing grant,
Yes.
it would all be part of that, and we would come back to council.
I think we have got Macola who's able to answer either that question or a recent one. Let's get them up here.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Hi, my name's Katie. I'm with Macola, and I just wanted to jump in. Michelle did a great job of explaining how that BC Housing process works. There's a number of opportunities where BC Housing and the team work on that project budget as we move through the project. Typically, any funds that are left over at the end of the project, if any, which in my experience, there's not usually much, but are held in trust for the project in the event they can use them to do upgrades or additional changes through the first term of the mortgage. And then typically it buys down the mortgage at the end of the term or is remitted to BC Housing.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask a related question on that? So let's, it's not hard to see construction cost overruns, possibly in other projects that Macola's administered. And what have you done in those cases where you find a shortfall or even a significant shortfall to bridge that gap?
So we would work with BC Housing and potentially CMHC as well if we were successful with the BC Housing funding to move the project forward. We don't set our final project until we're fully tendered. So we do a full tender. We'd work with a construction manager early on in the process to try to eliminate as many risks as we can. And we'd carry a healthy contingency for anything like ground risk that might occur through the project that would be an unforeseen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe while I've got you here, on the other side of this, one of the concerns that's come up is also who gets the housing, and how do we? What's the mechanism for? I understand it's the BC Registry, but is there a mechanism for making sure that our vulnerable population here in Cumberland gets on that registry in time to have those units available for them?
Yeah, I think that's something that Macola often does when they're in communities and they already have a number of existing relationships in the Comox Valley is work with those service providers to help them ensure that their client groups and people who are accessing their services are on the registry and have selected this building as a place that they'd like to live.
Okay, so would that would include our food share program here as one of those service providers here in as
definitely.
Our local? Okay, great, thank you. Back to staff, I'm thinking. If we're unsuccessful in getting this funding, then this zoning is in place. Can VHA then sell this land to a private developer that can then put a building there of this size without an affordable component? Or a 29, I guess it would be a 29 because they wouldn't get the density bonusing?
That's right. And I mean, I suppose council does have the option. I mean, if the proposal was unsuccessful, council could downzone the property.
That was going to be my exact
That's
next
an
question.
option.
Yes, thank
Another, I know in talking with the director of planning, the possibility of with the zoning bylaw being reviewed, that there would be some opportunity to look at some other possible options like inclusionary zoning or something that might be provide a more guardrails around what could or could not happen there.
Okay.
And maybe just to add to that, it wasn't until within the last year in 2024 that we could use inclusionary zoning to require that only affordable housing is built at a location in a zone. But when this RM4 zone was created, we didn't even have that authority. So we had to use the density bonus. That was kind of the only tool available. So yeah, exactly. I think your backstop here is downzoning. But something we want to look into in the future is using inclusionary zoning on in similar situations, or maybe like retroactively for this lot as the backstop, so that only affordable housing could be built.
Yeah, because this is the only lot that is zoned RM4.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I guess, yeah, because I'm willing to move this forward. I just want to make sure that it, I understand it's big, it's not perfect, but it is the only proposal we've got going forward right now for affordable housing that we do desperately need in this community. So I'm willing to make that trade-off, but if we're not getting the funding and the affordable component of this, yeah, I would rather not see that building there, but.
Anything else?
So, yeah, I mean, I like the people that are going to make the sacrifice are obviously the local residents on Second and Amble's side, and I'm wondering, you know, it's a huge project. Is there going to be any availability for input, particularly around things like privacy? I mean, nobody suddenly wants to have a window glaring down on them. Is there possibilities for input on design and design parameters should this move forward surrounding that? You know, it's as somewhat of a compromise.
Something I'd really like to talk to Nicole about, you know, and we haven't got into that detail yet, you know, if we do get the funding and it seems, and it is going to go ahead, is really what kind of communication is possible, if it, you know, will be available to local residents. I don't know about changing the design. In fact, that might be difficult, just to be honest, with the development permit, which is to come to council, that will set, you know, basically where the windows are and that kind of thing. But I really think in terms of landscaping, there might be other elements, and bringing the community, the neighborhood along with what's happening, like giving them the ability to follow along and maybe be a little bit of a part of it, I think would be important. With the Ambleside road construction, it happened in that neighborhood not that long ago. You know, my understanding is there were some neighbors with some concerns, and the contractor and village staff were able to take the time to talk to them one-on-one and kind of bring them into understanding what was going on, and that really helped to address their concerns. So that's the kind of thing that I think we would talk to McCullough or the builder, whoever that is, about at the time.
Thank you.
So I think input needs to happen before third reading from the community, right? This is the time. This and the info session and all the other. Yeah. So I just want to give some context for those of us who were not at the table when this whole thing started. This is work that has been ongoing for about 10 years now. It was initiated by Dawn to Dawn, with Elder Mary Everson having a role in blessing the site, having the 2 welcome poles that are in the Peace Park were part of this project, and there were a series of Indigenous workshops in the community to sort of bring the culture and community of this project to Cumberland. The goal is to have, I think originally it was a 30 or 40% Indigenous population. When I moved to the village, there were a lot more Indigenous people here than there are now. And further, when I moved to the village, most of the people who lived here were struggling economically. And I know I wouldn't be here if the housing costs were what they are now. I bought my house for $130,000. When I first moved here, I rented an entire property for $500. And there's a lot of people who have contributed greatly to this community, and also wouldn't be here if they had to purchase that housing now. And so this, for me, this project is a lot about kind of pulling back some of the gentrification that's happened in Cumberland over the last, I don't even want to say a number of years. The change in this community has been dramatic. We've grown by 70% in the last 20 or so years. And our housing costs have risen by 54%. So I know none of us think we don't need affordable housing. So council has since then attempted very many times with very many developers to try and get affordable housing in smaller projects throughout the village. And it just doesn't work. For-profit developers need so much density to make their money, to make the balance sheet work on a project, that there's just no way for us to get the scale of development. I know there are people who think this project is too big. This is as small as we can go and get all affordable housing. So that's what we're trying to do. And we have seen with the 4-story on the main street that there was a lot of fear. That project has 22 or 23 units and 9 parking spots. So we've had very little issues in surrounding neighborhoods from parking from that building. This building is sited on 3 lots that have been amalgamated. So that one ride-out building, the building on the 4-story on with the micro units on Dunsmuir, could fit 3 of those in this space. So, and that's not what we're doing. We're trying to find the scale that suits our community and still get the affordable housing we need. And I think that even through the OCP process, we've talked about bringing rather than concentrating all the density in the downtown core, to put pockets of density throughout the community so that we're not changing the character and feel of the village. We know that that our residents want the village to remain a village feeling place. And so we need to spread out density in order to accomplish that. We don't want to put it all in one spot. So that's my spiel and why I'll be supporting this. The question I have is one about the angled parking, I think in the original drawings was facing that way, which I believe is northwest. And I think we want it to angle this way because people who are driving coming home from Courtney, presumably those people who are driving are coming home from Courtney, or that is the predominant traffic pattern anyway, are going up that street and then having to turn right, and their parking spot's gonna be oriented the wrong way. So it'll be hard. So just putting that thought in there. There's also, this is more negotiating with Island Health, but there is a gate. So there's an alley behind the property and there's a green space. Well, it's not a green space. It's VHA property, but it's like the buffer between the seniors and the next property that could be a very easy and quick route to school. But there's a gate in the way, if we could ask them about that. And I also just there's been some concern about us not getting DCCs from this project. And I know it's in the report, but I would just like to hear from staff again that we will be receiving DCCs from this project because we do not have a mechanism for not receiving them right now.
Yeah, no, that's correct. We will be receiving DCCs for this project. I would expect Macola may formally request a DCC waiver because I think that might need to be demonstrated to BC Housing, that the question has been asked recently and answered. Yeah, Michelle, you want to add something to that?
And I also just want to add that we do have a HAF application in. What is that? Housing
Housing Accelerator Fund.
That would give you amenity funds. So you can't waive DCCs. You can actually pay them. And of course, we have
Through
no
that
money
fund.
to pay DCCs out of our pockets. But
Yeah.
if you got the housing accelerating and there was a request, that's the only time that there would be an option.
Great, thank you. Anything else before we make that recommendation?
Yeah, I still had a couple of questions arising. The inclusionary zoning, because you say we didn't have that option previously. There's nothing to say we couldn't put that in this one before the next reading. Is that correct?
Good question. That turns out is not simple because the province requires an economic analysis and the public consultation on the economic analysis for the specific rental rates for that bylaw. So it's really not feasible in the kind of time frame we're talking about.
In which case, is it possible to, or is it appropriate to make it clear to VHAB that in the event that we don't, that this isn't funded, and in the unlikely event that they view that as an asset they might want to sell as a piece of land, that it should be no surprise to them that we would instantly downzone. Right?
Yes.
That I think needs to be clear that we would not let that zoning stand in that case. Right?
Yeah, we'll certainly pass that on to VHOB, make sure.
Yes. And I believe when we discovered the land, there was some agreement between the village and Island Health that said if they decide that it is not land that they need, that it reverts to the village. That's how the previous mayor got that.
Okay.
We have first right.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
When,
go ahead.
oh, sorry. And I appreciated you explaining your decision, and I think I've got a little bit sort of. I'd like to take a moment to do the same. It's a difficult decision. We're balancing the stable, lower cost rental housing for about up to about 80 people, with the impact on the neighbourhood, which is for neighbours is not trivial, and I don't want to trivialise it at all. But during my campaign, I supported a range of housing options, and I particularly supported rental units. And this was just 3 months ago. I knocked on 400 doors and talked to many, many people, and stated clearly that I supported this project, and that I supported the expansion of rental provision in this village. But it's clear residents oppose it, and we must consider their concerns as infrastructure and traffic and shading and parking and affordability and demographics of the residents and the neighbourhood character. And we've got enough infrastructure. We've got the water and sewer, and the school spaces. The school is expanding, so I think that question is answered. The building will generate a bit more traffic, but compared to the traffic that flows around the school every morning, it's still going to be way, way less. And I live just right next to that, and I see the way that people manage that interaction of additional movements and children appearing, as they just slow down. And it works, and I believe it'll work here, and having a sidewalk will help as well. There's a bit of extra shadow that maybe in the winter evenings will reach across the road, but otherwise the studies clearly show that it doesn't shade. But it does overlook, and that's not trivial either, and I accept that. Parking, let's find a way to at least know that if we still have to grant the variance, but because we always will have to, but that we've found 30-something spaces, because some units might not have cars, but some units will have two, and particularly perhaps the VHA units where people will have partners, right? There's been some confusion out there about what affordability means. This report has the numbers now, and I think it demonstrates to me this truly is affordable, and so significantly below what we might see on Facebook when we look for that sort of stuff. All right? I'm saddened by concerns about the type of people who might live in this building. Most tenants will have similar income levels to many residents we already have who just managed to secure their housing when it was cheaper here. And like 6 years ago, a development of 86 units was built 20 feet from my back garden. And there were worries about that. And those houses look directly into our back window. And we've had to change some of the things, and our quality of life has improved. And it's improved because the people who moved in there are community contributors. They're amazing people. They are lower income because they're smaller units, right? But some of those people become very good friends as well, and I think that's an asset. Those 86 units are an asset to our community. So the neighbourhood will change, and for some that'll be really difficult, and I'm really sorry. I do hear you. But I've made a different choice, and so I'm voting for it. And I think that expanding it is necessary to increase the chance of funding. I think it's absolutely necessary, and I'd rather accept those compromises than wait another 2 or 3 years for anything in this village. And I want to thank you for indulging me in that.
Thanks, Councillor. I will just say that there's been a lot of, let's just put it somewhere else. It's really, really challenging to find free land. And so the opportunity that this specific piece of land offers us is enormous. The lease is free to the village. It is bordered on 2 sides by institutional owners, property owners. It is moments away from school, and it's on a bus route or very close to a bus route. So it really does offer. I understand that the impact to the immediate neighbors, but the impact is relatively small, considering there's only 2 sides of neighbors, not 4. So again, when we're looking at the options, it comes out as a good option. So there's a recommendation there if no one has any. Oh, Courtney?
Would it be all right if I gave a bit more of an answer to the very first question that was asked about referral to committees?
Sure.
Now that I had a little bit of a moment to think about it, assuming that would come back to you. I think that because this is not like the beginning of a new proposal, this is addition of another story, but generally the form and character would be remaining the same. The variance, there's kind of not really any other options. It's either yes or no for the variance. I just would suggest that it might be a little bit difficult to know exactly what to ask the committees to weigh in on, rather than as a vote in favor or a vote against, because looking at the details, there's not really a lot that could be changed to make it work, except maybe not going ahead with a 4th story. So, and just balancing the time, the staff time it takes to prepare for and attend these meetings, and the time of the committee members as well. Just something I think to consider. I don't think like committees could meet in February, so we'll also be working on finalizing or working on the agreements. So I don't see necessarily the timeline causing an overall delay to the project, but just the time that it takes away from the other work on the project. We will happily go to committees if that's the direction of council. I just wanted to provide some comments on this specific proposal.
Well, that would have to be a motion as well.
Okay, so let's do this one first. and
Yeah,
then-
I'd like us to answer that question, actually, yeah, as to whether we do. I would like to move that we refer this to the APC and the HAH for consideration of this addition of a 4th story.
So we're in the middle of another item. So let's do this item first, and then can you make that motion after we do this one?
I see, yeah. There's no
But there's
motion on the...
sorry,
there's
recommendation.
no motion.
Yeah.
So you'd like us to, to address to make a motion around the initial recommendation before we come to that? I don't mind that. I don't think it
Okay.
makes any
Should
difference.
I go ahead?
Go for it.
I'll move that council give first and second reading to bylaw 1223, cited as zoning amendment bylaw number 1223/2025 for the property described as Lot A, Block 32, District Lot 24, Nelson District, Plan EPP 103460. And that council support in principle amendments to the housing agreement to increase the number of VHA staff dedicated units from 4 to 6, and expand requirement that staff are employed within the Village of Cumberland to within the Comox Valley Regional District, and direct staff to pursue locating up to 12 parking spaces for 3345 2nd Street on the adjacent VHA owned lot.
Seconder?
Second.
Okay, that was
Second.
Councillor Sullivan. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Go ahead, Councillor Ward.
Okay. So I remove. I move that we refer this edition of the fourth story for further input from the Affordable Housing Committee and the APC.
Second.
Could we talk about that?
Yep.
I won't be supporting this. If it's yes or no for third or fourth story, for me it's only yes. We've said no to, they said no to 3 stories twice, so I don't understand why we would send it to them for that option. If it's just yes or no to third or fourth story, I don't understand the reason for that, and the staff time I don't agree with. That's how I feel about that.
It will,
One person though.
it will be challenging for them to give real input, I would think. I can see why you'd want to refer it as a kind of courtesy, because I don't think this APC actually, this group, this particular APC has seen this,
No.
but given that council recommended that we move to 4 stories, and now it's come back to us, it just feels a bit like it's not, I don't know what input they would be giving.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
I wanted to have a discussion.
Yeah, I'm with Sean on this one. I think that the staff time required for the additional work required the level of input we're going to get from there is not going to be that much.
Yeah.
I would hope to see letters from them. I'm sure we're going to get a lot more letters between here and third reading. And I would like to see just letters from everybody in the community on this in support, hopefully.
Yeah.
Because I think
Understood.
this is a good project.
I've certainly heard all the non-support, so it would definitely
Yes.
be nice to hear some of the support. I know there's a lot out there, so
Exactly.
I'd like to hear some of that too.
Yep.
No, thank you for considering that. I guess we still have to vote, right?
We do. So all in favor? And opposed?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. 2025 to 2029 financial plan review. I will just say that the minutes and everything from the financial plan village hall are in the package for this meeting. We had one person attend that meeting. Anybody want to move that?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of the financial plan? And that is carried unanimously as well. There is no new business. Notices, motions, and announcements. Please do check the website before coming down here to attend one of these meetings, just in case. But the Heritage Committee is scheduled to meet on this Thursday, January 16th at 4 p.m. in Council Chambers. And question period. We'll just start with, we can start with in person if anyone has a question. You're welcome to come up and ask. It does need to be a question, though. And if there's none from the audience, is there any online?
I have one question by email. In the proposed bylaw 1223 in section 2D, it states to remove the 84 UPH and replace it with 145 UPH. However, in the existing bylaw, there is no 84 UPH. The notice that was delivered also only referred to 84. How do you amend something that isn't there?
I have no idea what that question means. I don't know what a UPH is.
Units
per hectare.
Oh, units per hectare. Okay, I think we had an explanation of that in the
And
presentation.
So is the question saying they can't see it in the bylaw
in the
because
original bylaw.
because the RM4 would have been a zoning amendment to the original bylaw, right? And so that would have been the one where the 84 came into,
Yeah.
not in the original. But
The question is confusing.
The question's coming up in the original bylaw for the RM4 zone that I believe was done in 2016.
No.
The
Yeah.
20. And the question is stating that there was no 85 number in that bylaw, but I imagine it's there.
Are there any other questions while we wait for?
Here it is. This should be the one.
Oh.
Oh, not that one.
Is this a question that could be answered later?
Most definitely.
Because it seems like a technical question of detail, and I appreciate that that's important, but is an answer sufficient later?
Yeah.
Can we just repeat the question one more time? Because I'm not sure I'm terribly clear on it.
In the proposed
neither.
bylaw 1223 in section 2D, it states to remove the 84 UPH and replace it with 145 UPH. However, in the existing bylaw, there is no 84 UPH.
okay, well, on page 112, I can see a chart that says 85 UPH so far.
So if it's 85, if it's a typo of 84 from 85, I would
Oh, I see what they're saying.
maybe.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. There's more questions. This is about the lane. It appears as if some of the existing lane on the side of the land and around the back is being used to facilitate parking. And that's shown in the map in the OCP and the concept plan. However, proper approval is needed to allow roadway to be closed. I do not see where this has happened. Is the lane being appropriated for parking?
The lane behind, I think, is it being appropriated for the building?
Is there a legal lane anywhere?
There is behind the property, yeah, on the cadastral maps. There's that lane goes from Ambleside and continues to the very west end of that property. But this, from what I see in the plans, it's not being appropriated for parking.
It doesn't go through the property.
The building's being set back to within 2 meters of the back property line, and there's no room for parking in there. And there's no plans that I see in any of this. Sorry, I hope I didn't just grab your
No, I
question.
think that's all right. Is this about the lane between the Cumberland Lodge and the subject property? That section of the lane?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the driveway, but the lane
Yeah.
behind. Yeah.
Yeah, so actually, the previous council gave direction to agree to close that lane after the OCP and zoning amendment in 2023 was adopted. So that direction's been given, but the lane hasn't yet been formally closed. So the VHA has been using that lane for parking. It has, and it doesn't have any services in it, as many of our lanes do. So yeah, council already gave that direction, it just hasn't been formalized.
Oh, I see.
It was land title office yet.
Is there any covenant? Well, it's a roadway, so it's not a land or anything like land. So
It's yeah,
is village free to do what it wants with that?
Well,
or?
it's a green space now, I guess.
that's right.
If
So-
if we dead end it, right?
Okay, are we talking about the lane between?
Isn't there a question?
Yeah, so the question, what was the question? Could you
Is the
repeat the
lane being
question?
appropriated for parking?
Can you start,
The
can you
short
start at the
answer is
beginning?
no.
The existing lane on the side of the land and around the back is being used to facilitate parking in the OCP and the concept plan.
Well, I can definitely say that so that lane, there's 3 parts to it. The part that just that goes, the part that's just, but the only part that's between the Cumberland Lodge property and the subject property for Quoxie Doss, that one part of a 3-part lane has been used for parking by Cumberland Lodge for many years, and previous council already directed for it to be closed. And what that means is basically amalgamated with the Cumberland Lodge property.
Right.
But
But the lane that goes out to Ambleside would remain.
Remains as is, as a village lane, and then the lane that goes up to First remains
Yeah.
as a lane. The one with a gate on it.
Yeah.
That remains lane.
Okay.
No change.
Okay.
Okay.
No,
Thank you.
not to muddy the waters, but so you said it's been appropriated? It's not legally appropriated, just like
No,
how does that work?
It's
Is that-
been closed.
Okay.
It's called a road closure, and then be amalgamated
Okay,
with
but
the VHOP property.
not legally and formally amalgamated with it, right? As it
It
doesn't
would-
become their property.
It would become their
Oh,
property.
it was. Okay.
Yes.
Which shows differently from the cadastral.
That's right, because it hasn't been completed at the land title office yet. So it
Copy that.
still shows as a lane
Okay, thank you.
on the official documents.
Thank you for
Okay.
clarifying that. Any more?
There is one more question about lot coverage of the proposed building in the parking lot. Is the lot coverage equal to or less than 65% as required in the RM4 zone?
So the lot coverage is about 50%, 51%.
Lot coverage is 50 or 51%.
It's less than what's permitted in the zone.
Less than what's permitted in the zone,
And that's with the parking, yeah.
including the parking.
In fact, the drawings in the package say 42%. I don't know if that's... Oh, the building.
That's the
Oh,
building,
sorry,
yeah.
Including the parking.
With the parking.
Thank you.
No more questions. Okay, last call for audience questions. Okay, thank you all for being here, and thank you for sharing your concerns with council. Yeah, we are all available at any time outside of this because we're going to move into a closed meeting. So could someone recommend the closed portion, please?
I'll move the council close the meeting to the public pursuant to Section 90 of the Community Charter to continue to consider an annual report and labor report.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?